Jack is a mosquito, a bounty hunter. At least what's left of him. They betrayed him, broke him, and left him to perish out in the wastelands. But he managed to survive. And for some people, that's bad news, because he will have his revenge, and blood will be spilled.
Okay, so once again, hi everyone. Thank you very much for coming, and thanks to Fezdansha and GameDevHub for having us. We really appreciate it. As was mentioned before, my name is Ivan Kozmon. I'm a game designer and animator of this particular game that we're making. It's called Blood Will Be Spilled, and that's what we're gonna talk about this next few minutes. What will I talk about? First, I'd like to introduce the game that we're actually making. As we, in probably May, we finished our first year of making this game. I'd like to tell you more about what we actually achieved in this first year. And in the third section of my presentation, I'd like to talk about the things that we learned along the way, how we approach the things that we do, and some lessons learned, I hope. So, who we are? We call ourselves Double Quote Studio, like from a month ago, probably, because we realized that we probably need to call ourselves somehow. So we are a small 4-person studio from Bratislava, and we are 2 artists, me and my brother, and 2 programmers, and we like to say that we are 4 managers in our team. So what's the game that we're making? It's called Blood Will Be Spilled. As you've seen in the trailer at the beginning, you play as a mosquito bounty hunter. It's a 2D action platformer set in a world inhabited by insects. It's got a spaghetti western theme, and we are making it in Unity. It's the first game that we have ever worked on, and we've been working on it since like April 2014. Some of the unique selling points or the features that we are currently working on, we want to have really action-packed shootouts in the game where every bullet would count. So you, like in all the Western movies, you've got just a 6-shooter pistol, and you need to reload 1 bullet at a time. And it takes time, so you need to really think carefully about how you shoot. We also want to introduce a simple 2D cover mechanic that adds more tactical depth to the shootouts. As the main character is a mosquito, you will be able to suck the blood of your enemies to fuel your more powerful abilities and skills that are divided into 3 skill trees that each of them accommodate a certain playstyle. We like to call them the good, the bad, and the ugly. Then, as it is something that's really common in Westerns, you are able to spin your gun and make gun tricks with the pistol to increase your score and show off your finesse. We really like games that have voiceovers, so we choose to do that as well. We have voiced cutscenes and hopefully all the gameplay in the future. All the illustrations that you will see and that you already saw are hand-drawn in a quite comic book style. And what we are really proud of is that we've got, or will have, original music by Slovak award-winning post-jazz band called dymiace. Next slide. So, because the book, Still Like an Artist, is something like a Bible to us, we really like to take inspirations from all the sources we possibly can, mainly from the games that we like to play that are relevant to the game that we are making, then to the movies that we like and directors and artists whose work we respect. Next slide, please. So, what we actually managed to make in a year. I decided to put it on a timeline. The production started in April 2014. when we didn't know how to actually work in Unity at all, and we just had a few concept arts and a basic premise of a story, well, or at least of the world that we want the story to take place in. By October 2014, we actually had our first testing prototype where we tested most of the basic mechanics like walking, jumping, and shooting and stuff. And we also had like, I don't know, 30 pages of game design document. By November 2014, we managed to put together our first public trailer. It was also the first time that we actually shown the game to the public. The public was like 50 people of our friends and so on. And we had the trailer on Game Developers Session in Prague. Then in January 2015, we were invited to Indie Games Expo on Central European Game Conference in Vienna, where we presented our first public playable prototype. We gathered a lot of valuable feedback that we tried to put to our first demo that we finished in May. It is the first version of our first demo that we sent to the festival called Indicate in LA. And hopefully we will wish us luck. So, at the beginning, these were the first concept arts of our main hero. You can see that you can clearly see that he's a mosquito. Even though that the illustrations are well drawn and I think that they are quite detailed, I don't think that the main character is actually likable or cool enough. So we wanted to change him a little. So this is our current character model. We decided to hide most of the parts of the insect body, especially I found that it's called proboscis. That's the thing the mosquitoes use for sucking blood. And we also decided to break his wings and hide it beneath the poncho as well, because we didn't want our main character to be able to fly, as we find it a little boring. And the character design is inspired by characters like Spawn with the red poncho, Raziel from the Legacy of Kain series, and the legendary Blondie from The Good, the Bad, and Ugly, the Clint Eastwood character. My job in the whole process was to animate those beautiful illustrations. This video kind of shows the process of the journey that we went in animating the four-legged character, which was quite funny because Blood Will Be Spilled is the first time I actually doing character animation. I'm a self-taught animator. And to animate a four-legged character as something you do like for the first time, it was quite tough. But I hope that in our current version that you can try out, I think it's quite okay. And this is our gameplay from the last demo.
There's too many of them for Jack to blindly rush in. He needs to be careful. Hiding behind cover is not for cowards. It's for survivors. They should have gave in when they had the chance.
So this was a short segment of our current gameplay. So from the things that I want to talk about how we actually do things, In our previous career in commercial design and advertising, we found out that having a distinctive visual language that you use is actually something that's really helpful, especially in the long run, because it makes all the things that you produce and put on the internet more recognizable, and it is clearly attached to your brand and your brand language, even without the need to have your logo attached to everything that you produce. This applies to pretty much everything that you do, from trailers to all the Facebook communications and, I don't know, posters. But it also applies to all the gameplay elements like graphic user interface, I don't know, all the animations, all the assets. What we use mostly is having consistent visuals. That means that everything that we use is more or less hand-drawn, or at least done in a way that would look like it's hand-drawn. Also, having a specific style, we use certain colors, certain shapes and stuff. And as I mentioned, a really specific color palette. We try to avoid some colors and use some specific colors more than others, and so on. As for the drawing process, it basically starts with a pencil sketch, which is already quite detailed. Then, still on paper, it is inked, and all the shadows are applied to make nice contrast and stuff. And finally, it's put inside Adobe Photoshop, and the colors are added. And when it comes to character models for the game, they are also divided into parts that we then can animate. To capture the comic book-like style and the feel, you try to use mostly these elements. All the outlines are hand-drawn to create more organic feel, because you can see like they sink into the paper, and the shapes aren't exactly like clear. Then we use strong black shadows to create a bit darker images and also nice contrast. We use halftone patterns, which is something that was used mainly in dime novels and old comics books from the 60s, which make a nice middle ground between strong shadows and just colors. We use color palette where we avoid bright colors, except red. We really like to have the poncho and the blood to pop out. Before anyone mentions that insects actually don't have blood in our world, they do. Then we use background textures to like simulate the paper and the dirt to add a nice texture to it. And we are still kind of exploring the abilities to put more comic book-like elements into the actual visuals, like comic book panels or speech bubbles and stuff like that. Since the beginning, we knew that we wanted to have motion comic cutscenes, like from the game series Infamous, for example. They basically start with a really poor drawn storyboard that I drew. Then my brother recreated it. We added to After Effects, add all the effects, and finally camera work. Most of you have already noticed or came across the kind of a buzzword called game feel, which is something that is this nebulous topic that no one actually knows how to explain properly. But to give something like short definition, it's something like a combination of many different individually insignificant elements, or not so significant elements like art and animations and music and sounds and etc., and putting them together to creating much richer experience for the player, and making him kind of feel good about the game. The game has a good feeling, the good game feel. And one of the ways to achieve this is that every action that the player does creates rewarding feedback that he can that he feels good about, or she feels good about. And one of the ways to do this is also by using animations, and because they make all the characters seem more believable, like they actually are part of the world that you are in. This part was supposed to be animated, but because of the technical problems, we needed to cut it out. But just so that you have a basic idea, we use software by esoteric software, which is called Spine for animations, which allows us to create a skeleton created from bones, and then we attach sprites to certain bones and are able to animate them with keyframe animations, which is different from the approach, some of the classical approach that the 2D games use with frame-by-frame sprite animation. This is also easier for us because insects already have bodies divided into parts, so it looks natural, even though that we cut them into bones. This character is called Pablo. Pablo is our most basic enemy. His character design was created like back in May 2014, and we haven't changed it since because we really like Pablo. Pablo is quite cool, and he was supposed to be our volunteer to show all the game animations. Next slide. I'll jump straight to the part where I wanted to talk about genre. As you probably already noticed, we have a quite strong genre stylization in our game, which is quite common, especially nowadays, because when you have a strong genre like, I don't know, sci-fi or fantasy or military, it makes your game much easier to sell to a certain target audience. So it isn't quite uncommon to use genre in games, but sometimes games don't use the genres to the extent they actually could. Like the working with genre offers many different possibilities, especially a really wide pool of inspiration that you can draw from. And some games do it really well, but there are also some that do it quite poorly, because when you are working with a genre, it also bears a risk that your players expect that you can do certain things within certain genres. So, for example, a game, Watch Dogs, which some of you probably know, was a game about a hacker, but what he did most of the time was drive around in cars, shoot or beat people, so it wasn't that much a game about hacking. And we kind of wanted to approach it in a way that there are, in our opinion, there aren't that many Western games. So we wanted to, or want to create a Western game that actually feels like a Western game, that you can do things that you could do if you would be a hero of a Wild West movie. So I already mentioned a few times the term spaghetti Western, so to explain what it actually is, there is a certain misconception that the spaghetti Western is those comedy westerns with Italian comedy westerns with Bud Spencer and Terence Hill, but it's not exactly the case. Spaghetti westerns is a subgenre of Italian cinema, of Italian westerns. They were mostly shot in 60s and 70s of the previous century. They were basically mostly lower budget Italian films about their quite exaggerated vision of American Wild West. One of the probably most famous directors is Sergio Leone and his legendary movies like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Once Upon a Time in the West. Next slide. What is typical for this genre is that those movies have these really strong protagonists, but they are usually mostly anti-heroes with professions like bounty hunters and drifters and bandits and so on. And they often have questionable morality, where in those stories things like money or revenge is acceptable motivator for their actions. And usually those characters this isn't necessarily a rule, but it happens quite often. They are not so talkative. They are quite silent characters whose agenda is usually a mystery to all the people around them and is usually revealed much later in the story. Next slide. And what works for us as we are making an action game is that those movies have insanely high body counts when the life doesn't have that much of a value in those movies, and action and violence is usually used as something that moves the story forward. So it really works for you when you want to make an action game. Next slide, please. So what it offers us is like insanely huge pool of inspiration, but we decided to make it even larger by the approach of combining different worlds of different genres, which is also not something that's all that uncommon, especially in games. So we decided to combine the spaghetti western genre with the world of insects and create a brand new world. And what it allows us to do is to apply all the cliches or rules that apply to insect world and combine them with stuff that is already exists in the Wild West world. And we approach it in a way that we choose what we like from each world and ignore all the rest. So, for example, we don't have horses because that would be ridiculous, like mosquito riding a horse. But it allows us to do stuff like we can have Padre over here, who is a mantis, which is a priest, and we also can have a, I don't know, queen of bees who owns a saloon and stuff like that. And it actually makes at least a little sense. Next slide. So to sum it all up, I hope that now you have at least some idea about the game that we are actually making. How we feel about the game that we are making is that you probably don't need to have like one really original gameplay mechanic, especially in indie games, or I don't know, deeply personal, provocative story to make a good game. What is like enough is to have a game that does all the elements well, and maybe even though that they would individually seem mediocre, probably, when they are put together, they hopefully can make a game that feels good, that you will like to play, and where the atmosphere would be well done, I guess. So we hope to be able to show you what we mean by this around September, when we will have, hopefully, our first public playable demo ready. And then we will be really glad to hear how you feel about it. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you like what you've seen, follow us on those networks. And if you have any questions, I'll be here like for a few hours. And also, there's our game if you wanted to try our current demo. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation, and we have a few minutes for some Q&A, so if you have any questions, just wave and I'll come to you with mic. No one? Okay, why have you decided to move from commercials to making games or video games development?
Well, since like our childhood years, we were really fascinated by games, and we wanted to like be able to create some, I don't know, games, because we always liked movies, and games are something like interactive movies, I guess, because we like storytelling, not like hardcore storytelling, but storytelling that would be interesting. So games seemed like an obvious choice, I guess. And we didn't like the commercial sphere of, I don't know, advertising all that much, so we wanted to kind of quit doing that. So that's basically the reason why we choose to do so.
Okay, any questions?
Hi, you said that you are a self-taught animator.
Yeah.
So how did you start?
Oh, well, the first thing that I would advise is to get a software that has good documentation, I guess. The Spine is really good at that. They have really, really nice documentation and a good community that kind of can give you all the feedback you need. And then it was like gather all the books and tutorials that you are like able to, and try it out, and hopefully one day it won't look ugly, I guess. That was my approach, at least. And I still don't think that the animations are top-notch, and there is still a lot of work that can be done. So it's like never-ending process of learning, I guess.
Any more questions?
I have a question. Who was the speaker guy in the trailer and the cutscenes? Because he sounds professional and with American accent.
Yeah, he's a professional. He's a guy that did voiceovers for like insanely huge amount of indie games like Torchlight or Incredible Adventures of Van Helsing, where he did voiceover for like, I don't know, 40 characters or so. I don't remember his name exactly. Do you remember? But I can find it out, and I can like recommend him like with all my heart, body, and soul, because he's a great guy and like awesome professional, and yeah, and he wasn't all that expensive, honestly. So find me afterwards. I can tell you who he was.
More questions? Okay. Did you use Wilhelm's scream sound effect in one of these?
Yeah, we use it with some, I don't know, like 5% chance that it will play when a character dies, but yeah, it will help scream. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so thank you.
Thank you very much.